Good evening. It's fitting that at 5:20 we begin the session on the elephant in the room, which is the energy sector. Our Achilles heels, the sector that is leading us to default, the sector that is killing us. We're leaving it to last, but nevertheless, the most important sector is very important to discuss. I'm not going to sing any stories on the power sector. I think everybody reads newspapers, watches TV. You hear Hamid Mir and those guys saying, "Sir, energy ka kya banega?" The problem is the circular debt is huge. I don't need to give you any numbers. The energy sector is huge. The power sector is huge. I'm sure they're going to give you the numbers in the documentary. So we'll leave it at that. Here, listen to the documentary, then begin.
Energy is essential for economic development and poverty reduction, but Pakistan faces a number of challenges in the sector. The most prominent of these challenges is fiscal. Electricity and gas sectors are heavily in debt with a combined circular debt of over $14 billion. The circular debt imposes a significant burden on the government's budget and makes it difficult to invest in new energy infrastructure. The country imports around 43% of its total energy supply. This makes the country vulnerable to fluctuations in global energy prices and supply disruptions. Whatever energy does make it into supply does not always reach its use case in the most efficient way. Over 10 million people do not have access to electricity, and over 40 million people to clean cooking facilities. Pakistan has a long history of power outages, which cost the economy over $8 billion a year in lost output. These outages are caused by a number of factors, including inadequate generation capacity, transmission and distribution losses, and fuel shortages. DISCOs are the companies that distribute electricity to homes and businesses. These companies continue to be inefficient, losing a lot of electricity along the way. This is due to a combination of old meters, people not paying their bills, and people stealing electricity. There's also a relatively high energy intensity of GDP, meaning that it uses more energy than other countries to produce the same amount of output. This is due to a combination of inefficient buildings, appliances, and industrial processes. The energy sector emissions are a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution in Pakistan. This is a major concern as Pakistan is already one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. The industrial sector has the highest share of energy use. Combined with its heavy reliance on coal, the sector makes a disproportionate contribution to air pollution and GHG emissions. Despite these challenges, there are a number of opportunities to improve Pakistan's energy sector. The country has abundant renewable energy resources such as solar, wind, and hydropower. There's also significant potential to improve energy efficiency in buildings, appliances, and industry.
बिजली जब जाती है तो काम रुक जाता है, ज़िंदगी धर्म भरम हो जाती है, सारा काम ही हमारा बिजली पे है, वर्कर फ्री हो जाते हैं, हमारे ऑर्डर आगे पीछे हो जाते हैं जो हमने कमिटमेंट की होती है, और ये जो गैर अलानिया लोड शेडिंग जब दिल किया कर देते हैं उसकी वजह से बहुत सारी मुश्किलात का सामना करना पड़ता है।
मैं एक ब्यूटी पार्लर चलाती हूँ। ब्यूटी पार्लर चलाने के साथ साथ जो है महंगाई इतनी ज़्यादा है और बिजली की लोड शेडिंग इतनी ज़्यादा है कि कस्टमर्स आते ही नहीं हैं। जो कस्टमर्स आते हैं उनका काम जो होता है वो सारा रोशनी में, लाइट में करना होता है। बिजली होती नहीं है जिसकी वजह से कस्टमर्स नाराज़ होकर उठ के चले जाते हैं और काम रह जाता है। इस तरह हमारा सारा काम जो है ख़त्म होकर रह गया हुआ है।
This is the most important sector in the economy. It's going to take us down. It's going to make us default because we have run a huge amount of losses and we have no idea on how to control them. Now, we've been given 3 propositions here, so let me take those up. The first proposition is that there is a virtually universal consensus that DISCOs must be fixed through private sector participation or privatization. So, let me ask you, is that the only problem, or what is the biggest problem in the power sector? Is DISCO privatization? If you can be very brief, very quickly, because power sector is the most complex sector in the country. I certainly don't understand it. I don't know who understands it. Now, I know we've got a book on this, which Mr. Chima was here, was one of the authors. So Chima sir, why don't you begin? Is DISCO privatization the solution? Is that the only solution?
Thank you, sir. It isn't. DISCO is an issue, indeed it is, but the main issue actually are not the DISCOs. The main issue remains surfeit of policy, when none of the policies can be termed as public policies. Then we have governance issues. Governance is in the hand of non-professionals. Then we come over to the management of the power sector corporatized entities, which includes DISCOs, of course, the NTDC and the GENCOs. At present, all of them are staffed, full of political nominees who have no connection at all with the power sector or the energy sector. Then we come over to the operational management. We do not have chief executive officers who have fixed tenures. They're just looking after their charges. And right on top of it, you'll be really surprised to know it, that at the moment, DISCOs have vacant positions equaling 60,000. So they are top-heavy in nature. The head offices are filled up with senior people, grade 20, 21, they are there, whereas they have no legs to stand upon. Then we come over to the tariff. Tariff is in a bad shape. It is from vintage era, 1960. It is, as they say, the load suppression model, nothing to do with today's facts, the reality over there. Then we have a surfeit, extra capacities contracted, which the sector cannot sell. And so what happens is the DISCOs, the poor DISCOs are asked to collect bills which basically are on account of all these inefficiencies and add-ons for which at least the present Pakistani electricity customer is not responsible. Thank you.
So it's a huge mess. Yashfaq sir, I think you have a contrary position.
Yes and no. I agree to a large extent to what Tahir Saab said, except for one basic point, and that is DISCO the key problem or not? The fact of the matter is that DISCOs at present are failing to collect the revenues, improve their losses. Of course, there are difficulties in terms of management and appointments of people and so, but DISCO is a problem as a whole. In fact, circular debt starts from non-recovery and non-payment from the customer side. So it's very important that we rectify that. Now, the government, the NEPRA, the donors have come to this consensus that you just now read, that there is a need for private entrepreneurship, private participation, or privatization of DISCOs. The problem is that we are, while all of them are saying this, but they are also confused about what to do about it. Pakistan has recently decided to go on the path of open access and market competition in the power sector. That opens up the whole power sector, starting from supply, transmission, distribution, collection, revenue, and so on. So if we must stick to our policy, and that policy is that we have an open access and market system. The only thing is that there could be a speed of accomplishment of that objective, but we must move on that. So once we recognize that, that is a policy that has been adopted by many countries in the world. The West is all on that. India is also following that. Turkey has done it. So there are a number of ways of doing it. So privatization does not mean, as we used to think, that we take an asset and privatize it. PTCL be privatized, XYZ be privatized, meaning that we give every asset and every control to that. The new policy requires that the line business should be separate from the commercial business. And the line business means that the infrastructure is to be run by just like a railroad, and the customers can buy from any source. They can have direct contracts, they can have direct metering, and they have choices about what to do. An investor can generate in northern areas and can supply in the south, in Karachi, cheap electricity if it pays the rent for the transportation. So having said that, now once we decide about it, we should be clear about what are we trying to privatize. We are trying to privatize lines, or we are trying to privatize the businesses. Once we are clear about it, then we can move forward. The problem here is that we are not talking about that. The second thing, that dichotomy that I see, is that under the Constitution of Pakistan, there is a provision that the provinces can actually buy in bulk and distribute. So there had been a number of resolutions, in fact, by the assemblies in the provinces, that we will take over the distribution. We should clarify it once for all so that the policies move forward. We need to accomplish what we have decided rather than going back and forth. So we need to get CCI or somebody to decide that either they will take over the distribution or they will not take over the distribution. Third is that what are we looking for? I think we should be very clear. Are we looking for money? Are we selling it because we want to have more money and reduce our losses? Or we are looking for efficiency in transmission and distribution and benefit of the customer? If we go on the path of open access and market system, the world has proven that the private sectors can deal better, efficiency improves, the losses reduce, the government's liability in terms of serving the debts reduces. So
Fair
that's
enough,
where I
Ji.
stop.
You don't have to preach the private sector to me. I fully believe that. I fully believe that. But there's a big issue here. Nepra Saab, first of all, let me tell you, you can't find a better panel than this. We've got the former chairman of NTDC and chairman of PEPCO. We've got Ashfaq Saab, who's, mashallah, former secretary power and also NTDC, etc. We've got now Tasif Saab, who's chairman of NEPRA. And we've got Mahabibi, who's, and Khalid Saab has been writing a lot for the private sector. And then we've got Mr. Muhammad Ali Saab. So, Tasif Saab, how do you react to this proposition? Will privatizing discourse work? Is our system even capable of privatizing? I hear what Ashfaq Saab said, but will we stop signing PPAs if we privatize discourse? How will they buy from somebody if we have only PPAs in place?
First of all, thank you for having me today. Let me clarify, I'm not chairman NAPRA anymore. Former chairman. Because
Sorry.
even in the invitation you mentioned chairman NAPRA, so I don't want to be caught as or accused of identity theft or something. So yes, I have noticed one thing. Your pace is very fast, and the response of my two colleagues were extremely fast. As if we are definitely the engine of this train, and wherever we are going to head towards, the economy is going to just follow us, the engine. But probably it's time for introspection, time to calm down. The only good thing about Pakistan's power sector is that we have more capacity than what we need. So if today some magic happens in Pakistan and our Prime Minister or our other interested parties take Pakistan to the heights it truly deserves, power sector stands shoulder to shoulder and deliver from the word go. Had we been in the other way around, we were in shortage like we were experiencing a few years back, it was simply impossible. So we should take it as a great opportunity for lifting Pakistan's GDP economy. This is what we achieved about 3 years back, 2.5 years back. We went with this proposal to then Prime Minister and told them that, we have excess capacity. Why don't we sell the cheaper units, at the energy price to our industry? And coincidentally, that was the peak COVID time, and all the orders which were cancelled from India and Bangladesh, they came to Pakistan. So Pakistan's projection for the growth at that time from World Bank and IMF was around 1%. We actually achieved 5.9% very first year and 6% next year. So the point I'm trying to tell you is that the moment you are going to sell this excess capacity that you have, your capacity charges will come down and be spread on the larger number of units. So our problems are multifaceted. Discourse is basically the sales people of this industry. If a factory is doing bad, if the product is bad, if the product is extremely expensive, no matter what, there's no magical salesman in the world who will, one-time sale is probably possible, but every month making your consumer fool is simply not possible. We have to bring down the prices of electricity, and that requires many things. The first thing is governance. When my colleagues say that we need private sector, you know what this actually say? They want the right people for the right job. And generally, the perception is the right people will come from the private sector. If you give us good people in the public sector, why not? I mean, there's no better governance if you have the right governance in the public sector. But since we have already sort of raised our hands, given up on the governance model that we have in the public sector, we are looking for an easy solution out, that is private sector. We have good example, we have bad example. KE, for example, they could be able to reduce their losses from 40% to 15 or 16%. That's a fantastic achievement. But on the other hand, we are pressed between two jaws of the alligator. One is governance part or incompetence in the public sector, and the other is greed from the private sector. You know, they put in half of the Karachi aerial bundle conductors. There are 5 cables in that, 3 live, 1 neutral, and 1 earthing. For cost-cutting purposes, they removed the earthing. 29 fatalities were there, and we were so lucky that that number was so small. Compared to it, could have been catastrophic. So the point I'm trying to tell you is that IPPs, again, they have done what they were supposed to do, but then we have many cases whereby we have a case that they have made exorbitant profits. So we are caught between incompetence of the public sector and the greed of the private sector. Where to find the solution? So governance is our biggest problem. Fixing the generation mix is the problem that we are facing right now. I could be able to, in my tenure as chairman NAPRA, bring down generation mix from imported fuel-based projects from 62% down to now 39%. But still that 39% is so humongous. Was it in my control as chairman NAPRA to take care of rupee-dollar parity? Not at all. The same thing was probably affordable a few years back when your dollar and rupee parity was under control. Now you have made it, you have played havoc with that. Second thing is, after Ukraine and Russia war, the international prices rose so many times, like imported coal. When I came to Pakistan from Abu Dhabi, imported coal was $50 per ton. It went as high as $586 landed cost at one point in time. So these are the problems actually, multifaceted problems. We don't have one size fits all here. We have to approach everything separately.
Well said. It's a huge, complex system, and I'm afraid we always leave it to the last. And we always wish that the circular debt would come down. And then we have so many other demands of the private sector as well as the public sector. But the two issues are well posed. One is privatization is the solution. The other is governance is the big problem. Mahabibi, where do you stand?
So I think we should be asking the right question here, right? So instead of asking and taking privatization as a given, I think we should ask why our tariff is so high to begin with. Why is it unaffordable for consumers? And I think part of the problem is what Tausif Saab has here pointed out very correctly, that it's our dependency on fossil fuels, right? This is our excessive dependency, first on oil and then later on gas. And unless we move away from that deep dependency on imported expensive fossil fuels, we're not going to be able to solve the problem.
Is there an alternative? I don't see an alternative.
I think Tausif Saab has rightly mentioned that even it is possible to bring down your dependency from fossil fuels, right? Part of it is, of course, we are moving towards renewable energy, which is great, and we have set a goal of achieving 60% renewable energy by 2030. I do think that's a bit lofty goal to begin with, but at least we have that goal, right? And what that goal allows us to achieve is potentially a more affordable tariff, but also it ties into our greater goals of sustainability and moving in line with our climate goals as well. So that is a win-win. So I do think that we need to tackle the affordability problem to begin with, understand why it's so hard to recover bills from consumers, which is at the heart of why we need to privatize discourse. Thank you.
Ji Khalid Saab, is the problem recovery of bills?
Thank you so much. I think it depends what we are dealing with. If we are dealing with circular debt problem, I think discos are the heart of it. But if we are dealing with the tariff problem or affordability problem, then I think discos have only 10% to deal with it. What is the problem in energy sector of Pakistan? I think that this is the a lack of long-term planning or integrated sort of planning. Just to give you an example, back in 2007 to 2013, when there was accessibility crisis in Pakistan's energy sector, when there was 18 to 20 hours of load shedding, people were protesting and demanding that load shedding should be reduced. So each of the policy was targeted at reducing this load shedding, and we were sorting these short-term solution in terms of rental power plants, in terms of IPPs, and all sort of things. But after that short-term solution actually brought us to this affordability crisis. I mean, we didn't plan for the long term, and now that short-term solution brought us to this affordability crisis in terms of higher capacity payment charges, unsustainable fuel mix, dependent on imported fossil fuels, and so on and so forth. And after 10 to 20 years, I think the solution of this affordability crisis, that might lead us to another crisis, that would be sustainability crisis or environmentally sustainability crisis, because due to affordability or unaffordability, we are heavily investing in our indigenous coal reserves, which is cheaper, but that is environmentally degrading at the same time. So from crisis to another crisis, this is not the way we should do integrated or long-term planning. We should plan for the long-term, like 20 to 30 to 50
So this is another governance issue. So we've got another governance. Mohammed Ali Saab, would you sum it up? What is the key issue in the power sector? Why are we always beating about the bush? Why don't we have a solution? It's been 15 years or maybe more. In fact, it's been 30 years. From 1994, we've had a power sector issue. We spent, according to crude calculations, 11 trillion rupees. We need to pay another roughly 2.4, 3 trillion rupees. Somebody says 4 trillion rupees. We are bleeding like a bloody, what is that, Ebola patient. So please tell us what can...
Ji, thank you very much, Nadeem Sahab. Thank you for having me over. I think I'm the only one here on the panel who's representing the private sector and the investor, which by definition is greedy.
Please tell us what is your sorry, tell us your...
Sorry?
You said you're an investor, so please tell us what does that mean?
Investor means that I work for private sector and we invest into the power sector. I run for power projects, also IPPs, wind IPPs. So coming to all the issues that have been discussed, I think we can no longer afford to hit the can. We've been hitting the can down the road for over now 20, 30 years, and I think it's now or never. It will have, like for example, you're collecting about 9 trillion in your revenue, in your tax collection. Federal tax collection is about 9 trillion. And of that, about 800 to 900 billion is the increase in circular debt every year, which means that you are actually eating 10% of your total tax collection into this black hole that we all have gotten ourselves into. And so this is not sustainable. The whole system, the whole economy will collapse one day. Now, how do we address that? We talked about privatization. I think privatization is something which appeals to everybody. Tausif Sahab has rightly pointed out that there is one successful model which is running in Pakistan in the form of KE, where they were able to reduce the losses from about 40% to little over 15% now. And I live in Karachi, so I can vouch for it that this quality of service also has improved over the years and significantly improved over the years. The number of power outages have reduced significantly. So in the end, as a customer...
But Mohammed Sahab, not everybody agrees on the KE model. We'll come to that later. What is your magic solution?
Yeah, no, I'm just coming to that. So on the privatization, the real challenge is to make it viable, because these entities, the discos today, are not economically viable. So if you are inviting an investor, a private sector investor, to come and invest into these discos, you have to somehow come up with a model which is economically viable for the investor, because these discos today are not economically viable. Now, how do we do that? One, the territories are too big. I think they need to be further subdivided within these discos. They can even go up to the feeder level, and those feeders and certain collection of feeders can be privatized as a pilot. Those feeders, as Ashfaq Sahab said, there is this debate also going on that whether discos should stay in the line business or they also run the commercial part of the business. Now, when you say or talk about the wheeling part, and when you say that a customer should be free to buy electricity from wherever they want, then the other issue comes, which is that surplus capacity that government has set up. Now, what do they do with that surplus capacity? If you look at a disco tariff, there is a capacity charge that disco recovers from the consumer. That capacity charge in turn goes to CPPAG, and which is then paid to the IPPs or all the generation assets. Now, if you say, and that since it is connected on volume, and tomorrow we go for that wheeling thing, and in that wheeling, we say that a certain volume will then be subtracted from the disco's volume, then that's a loss, direct loss of capacity that will be there, and somebody needs to cater.
Sir, you agree that it is a governance issue then?
It is
a deep governance issue.
Governance is there. So
what is the issue
very rightly said that the state of affairs as far as governance is concerned, they're also not in good shape. But
no, sorry, let's define governance. Governance is simply how you're managing the sector. It's not governance of the country as a whole. How are you managing the sector? The issues that you're raising are all management issues. That if we do not manage this or that, or for example, we are not sure how the fuel is coming in, we don't know where the leakage is, we don't know. As Khalid Sahab said, planning. Planning is also part of the governance issue. If the boards are not properly organized, etc., it's a governance issue. So let's clarify, what is the key issue here? I think what happens in most power sector discussions, we never get down to the basics. What is the magic, or let me say, linchpin reform that has to happen? Ji, Joseph Sahab.
Dekhe ji, we are trying to fly a A380 plane here, and you want to fly it with bus driver or van drivers. This is never gonna fly. But agar ud bhi gaya, if it flies, it is gonna, yeah, of course, blast. So we need the right people for the right job. It is as simple as that. The world has done exactly the same thing. You know, now I have a lot of time by my side, so I've connected with a few groups in US. I see their problems are much bigger than ours. But the only difference is they are deploying the best resources, best people, you know, and backing them up with the, you know, in Pakistan you'll find a lot of critics, a lot of planners, a lot of story writers, book writers. But the only thing we are missing are doers, you know. So we need that. What I did practically, I brought CTBCM, Comparative Trading Contracts Bilateral Market. The idea is to let private sector slowly and gradually, you know, get into grips with the power sector. Like you buy clothes, you buy, I mean, despite COVID, our private sector did fantastically well. How? Because they are taking their own decisions. The decision is not coming from somewhere, you know, and they have to implement that. So I'm quite sure with the passage of time, once this CTBCM, and I believe the last hurdle was rules, which has already been approved and now notified, CTBCM is on. Now CPAG is going to bring one final report, and then NAPRA is going to, you know, wheeling charge.
But let me raise one issue with you. Let me raise one issue with you. I come from a central banking background, so I'm not one of you guys. One thing that we've done, IMF has done very successfully with Pakistan and many countries is, we've said central bank is beyond politics. So autonomize the central bank. Would you think that the power sector should be autonomized? There should be no Ministry of Energy? After all, how many countries have a Ministry of Energy? Ashfaq Sahab, how many countries have a Ministry of Energy?
That I won't know, but I wanted to say that apparently the consensus here is that governance needs to be improved. Now the question is...
Change the word, management of the power sector, not government.
Okay, management of the power sector may be improved. Now, how to go about that? That is the basic issue. Whether we go private sector or we do it the way we have been doing it. Now, it may be true today what Bashara Saab said, that there are so many positions are vacant, there are no non-professionals and so on. This had been the history. For 40 years, you will see the same thing. So do you want, the issue here is, do we want to remain on the same path, or as CTCBM has been designed and a new path has been charted out. The only thing is, if we set up a goal that the way to go forward is to induct private sector, it will be gradually that we will reach that. It won't be a panacea of everything if we announce it today. We need, for instance, I illustrated the problems, whether we want to privatize wires, whether we want to privatize it as a whole, lock, stock, and barrel. How do we want to go about? So if we agree to the goal, otherwise we should think if this goal was not there, we are back into the public sector, and all this is not just overnight. It is a culmination of 40 years of mismanagement. So please remember that. So let's make a goal very clear and then chalk out a path.
So what should the goal be? Should the goal be to make the power sector independent of politics, technically skilled, a sector that exists, for example, in the US or UK, etc., where there's no minister or secretary who runs the power sector, the power sector is run by professionals, professionally done, and we force you to produce a balance sheet that is meaningful? Or should the goal just be to leave this sector as it is?
No,
and that's fine, and privatize
precisely
the stuff?
not. Precisely what CTCBM has been prepared, the open competition, market competition, private sector players, only the wire business remaining with the public sector that could also be privatized with certain caveats, and a strong NEPRA. For instance, just now I heard that in Karachi there were so many fatalities, and because those cables were there and which were earth connection was removed, my question would be, why did NEPRA act on it? So the governance is this, that if you see some violation going on, that is what is to be emphasized. Otherwise, it should be left open. This is why the regulator is there.
Sir, can I respond on this?
Please.
Sir, first time in the history of Pakistan, the highest penalty that we could impose, that was imposed on KE, 3.5 million was given to the family of the deceased, and the job was arranged for the next of kin. And this model I rolled out in the entire Pakistan. Not a single disco in Pakistan had a HSC department or safety directorate. Very first time they had. Few more things that we did was basically opened up the discos. Now broken them down into two, wire business and the commercial side basically. And another milestone that I achieved was, as Chairman NEPA, that we have issued them licenses for next 20 years without exclusivity. So the point is, anybody can come in because there is no defined territory of any disco anymore. So if somebody wants to come and be a player within that disco, be our guest. Then another competition we brought within the transmission systems. Very first time we gave license to SIN, and then KPK, and now I think Punjab, so that they can give competition.
Basically, giving some remuneration for people who die is not a solution. The solution is that you should not have allowed the disconnection of earthing connections.
The management should have been sacked.
Should have been sacked. Yes. And this is where the governance is lacking. And this is what is the governance which is needed by professionals. There's no secretary required for this.
Okay, fair enough. So let's get to that, Chima sir. Please tell me, should the state bank analogy, does the state bank analogy work, or am I wrong?
I'll make 2 points first, sir. CTBCM is for tomorrow. We are living today, and we are in a bad shape. The power sector has become an existential threat for the country. It has to be tackled today. And implementation of CTBCM is going to be spread over some time. Imagine, sir, for CTBCM we need wheeling apart. NEPRA recently required all the discos to post their petitions for wheeling charges. You'll be really surprised to know that they posted a figure of rupees 28 per unit as wheeling only. So what even the best of the private sector is going to do? Nothing. There are issues. I'm sure all those will be surpassed. We'll take care of that. But the issue is today, until and unless the architecture of the whole power sector is not changed, and the first requirement for this change, of course, is professionalism. The government of Pakistan, through its Ministry of Energy, should restrict itself to policy only And the policy has to be a good public policy. The last policy we have, the electricity policy we have, believe it or not, it only assures the viability and sustainability of the inefficiency in the whole system. Nothing else. It does not support the Pakistani consumer. So the Ministry of Energy has to go out, forget about it, restrict itself to what? The policy alone. It has to be good public policy. And then we come over to the management of the discourse. Till such time, CTBCM takes over, or these are privatized, or doled out on management contracts. Probably management contracts is a better proposition. But before that, the boards hold the key to the success of all these discourse. At present, as I explained earlier on, all of the boards in Pakistan, 10 in number for discourse, 1 for the NTDC and then 4 for the GENCOs, are unfortunately all staffed by politicos who have no relevance to the sector at all. Until and unless all those boards are staffed by hardcore sectoral professionals, nothing can be done. And then there is a requirement to upgrade the CEOs of these companies. We'll have to do that, otherwise nothing happens. If you post great professionals, and those professionals are available in Pakistan, as the CEOs, you'll see the difference. About the 60,000 vacancies, that is not much of an issue. All those things, the duties which those 60,000 had to do, could be outsourced. That is not the issue. It can be done. But remember, sir, if we take the example of K Electric, we also have to remember the plight of 4 Balochistan towns which come under the ambient, the license area of KESE. Those are Uthal, Hub, Bela, and Vendor. You go over there, KE does not supply power to them for more than 4 hours a day. They would rather concentrate their powers where you live, sir, the DHA, where they get more money for each unit which is sold. Utilities do not work like this. Utilities have to provide their service to everybody. So coming back to the point, sir, we divorce some or the other the Ministry of Energy from its governance duties. They cannot govern. It is not their duty. They restrict themselves to the policy. The boards have to be immediately corrected. And then a panel of experts has to immediately, say in 15 days, it isn't much of a job, interview the professionals available for the positions of the CEOs and all that, and assure that no new recruitment takes place in the discourse. All the vacancies, the duties of those vacant positions are outsourced, and then we move forward. Coming over to the architecture, sir, the main problem is the present Pakistani compliant customer, one who pays his bill each month, is being burdened by what? The inability of the FBR to collect taxes. Because FBR is not able to collect the taxes, it requires the discourse to collect the taxes on their behalf. And the strange part is, most of the people do not know about it, FBR payments are due on accrual on the posting of billing, not on recovery. They simply get accrued, even if somebody pays the bills or not, the money which is owed X percentage, 18% plus the income tax and all that, it is immediately transferred to FBR. So one, that needs to be corrected. Then the inability of the discourse because of governmental writ in Sindh, in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in some parts of Punjab, even southern Punjab, because we have not been able to collect the monies, right? Those monies should have been filled up by the owner, which is the government of Pakistan. It did not have the financial depth, so they did what? They got loans, right? And now the compliant customer has to pay those loans, the principal amount and the interest on it, sir. So this is the second loading. Then what happens is, not to be left here, sir, then the FBR also comes and says we want to collect additional tax. then more income tax. Those two have been collected, then the...
Let's
then
bring the other
provinces
panelists, and I'm sure the problem is the whole mismanagement permeates through the economy.
Exactly.
And we have one sector after another destroying each other because we don't want to solve the central problem, which is the fact that our government is absolutely short of professional skills and wants to wing it. Ji Mahabibi, what's your take on this?
I believe that the problem that keeps recurring, unfortunately, when it comes to Pakistan's power sector is that we haven't really solved the question whether we view electricity as a public good or a private good. I think that's at the heart of this issue, and that's why we keep moving in circles about why we even need privatization to begin with, right? So if I view this with the lens Chima Sahab has given us, the fact that, for example, he gave the example of Balochistan towns and they should also be provided electricity, and from a public policy perspective, that makes a lot of sense, right? But from a private perspective, if somebody is not able to pay, then they're not then economically, they're not even a demand, right? Because they're not able to pay. They might be willing, like they might want that good, but they're not able to pay. So they're not even a customer to begin with, unfortunately. So I do believe this is at the heart of the issue, and that's something that keeps recurring throughout our policy lens as well. That's the problem we keep seeing in our policy. For example, if you look at the 94 policy, one would assume that views electricity as a private good, right? That's the lens that it's bringing into the policy. However, when we look at other energy policies subsequently, we keep flitting between what we even want. So unless we solve that crucial problem, what Pakistan views electricity as energy as, absolutely. So it ties back to the governance problem.
Agreeing to Chima Saab and Ms. Maha, but let me take my integrated planning forward and present a slightly different perspective and linking energy and economy or economics of Pakistan. One way to look at it is our consumption mix as well. I mean, the 50% of demand coming from residential sector, 20% comes from industry and other so on, which means that we are wasting or we are paying to generate electricity in terms of dollars, and we are providing it for the unproductive use, not for the industrial sector. If we try to increase the industrial demand and link it with, like, energy is the fifth factor of production in terms of economics, so we can have this.
Why are you calling my consumption unproductive? So my consumption is productive too?
Yep, your consumption is productive, yes, obviously. But if we link it with industry in terms of dollar earning or foreign exchange earning industry, that would solve, I think, many of the problem. And it would integrate economy and energy as a good, efficient, and productive part of the economy as well. Second is that we need to integrate in terms of capacity building with engineers plus economists and plus management professionals into the corporate governance of the DISCOs and other electricity entities. Second is that we need to take it as a holistic sort of view, not just the power or electricity sector. We need to take into the transportation sector. We need to take into the account the cooking sector of Pakistan and link it with the power sector. Tosif Saab rightly mentioned that there is a capacity, there is a huge amount of capacity which we can utilize. So why can we not link transportation sector or bring EVs to the solution, or convert our cooking practices to power sector or towards power stoves?
Once again comes down to the governance issue, about bringing a behavioral point. Ji Mohammad Ali Sahab.
So, Nadeem Sahab, first of all, your last question, I don't think that there is any magic solution for the problem at this point in time. At the most, you can divide the issue or the solution into a short term, medium term, and then long term. And I think the lowest hanging fruit in this case is that you improve the governance, and I think there's a consensus on the table. And then there should be a roadmap for privatization, and privatization has to take place in a very gradual manner. You cannot overnight decide to, say, for example, privatize Casco or Pesco or your other loss-making discos because political challenges, financial challenges, and there are so many other things which will come in your way, and you would never be able to achieve what you really want to. The third issue that also needs to be addressed is the availability of capital. because you can capital, because you cannot improve the performance of these discos, you cannot basically make them profitable entities without investing capital. There's substantial amount of capital that is needed. There's a study which I was going through, I think that was done by USAID or some other agency, and they've estimated a number of $15 billion. Tausif Saab would know the number, I think, better than me, for the modernization and for the system augmentation of the distribution companies. Last point which Khalid Saab mentioned, I will just further explain that point and from a private sector or from an industry standpoint. So if you look at your consumption pattern, in your peak summer demand hits about 30,000 megawatts, and it drops down to about 8,000 megawatts in the end of November or end of February, because these are those 2 months when air conditioning load goes down and the heating load does not come in. And this shows that your grid is a very, very unhealthy grid. And now, why is your grid unhealthy? You asked a very relevant question that my consumption also is productive. The grid is unhealthy because this peak demand, and I looked at NPCC data, Tausif Saab would also have seen that data, that peak demand stays only for 30 to 40 days. And what you do is that you are maintaining capacity for that peak demand, which is there only for 40 days. And then for rest of the year.
Once again, a governance issue.
And
once again, somebody at the center of the power sector is not thinking.
Yeah,
and this is where I come to.
Let me just complete.
Please go ahead. Quickly, Karan.
Very quickly. So the real issue is that we have not been able to attract the industrial consumers to the grid. Now, I'm right now working on setting up a project, and we are going for our own captive power generation. Why? Because the power that you get from the grid is not reliable. For domestic consumers, the international benchmark is 13 interruptions in a year. For an industrial consumer, the international benchmark is 2 to 3 outages in a year. Now, when you are taking power from the grid, and there's a classic case, ICI PTA, which later on became Lotte, they had put up their plant on KE, which was KESC back then. And within, I think, first 2 years of operation, they decided to abandon that grid connection, and they had put up their captive power. And it was also mentioned in the agenda that then the policies of the government and the gas pricing mechanism also encouraged that, and a lot of industries then found it a very convenient, easy solution to shift to that.
The problem is at the heart of the issue, everybody that tells me, is the issue that we don't even know how to manage the sector. So we can go left, right, and center, whatever. Who's doing the long-term thinking? Planning Commission certainly isn't. We have an integrated planning unit there, but it does nothing. And even if it does something, nobody wants to listen to it. Does NEPRA, we've got a ton of regulation. We've got NEPRA, we've got OGRA, we've got PIB, we've got so many. Ashfaq Saab, aap bataiye. Is there the capacity in these places to run the system? Do they know what they're doing or not?
I tend to fully agree with Tahir Saab that we at the present don't have adequate capacity, maybe very low capacity, professional capacity to handle these things. The fact of the matter is that we need to improve governance. That is a consensus. How to go about it? One way is, as Tahir Saab articulated, that we have boards and we have professionals and nothing to do. Let's call spade a spade, Tahir Saab. Will it happen? Why it didn't happen? Let's be very clear about it. That's why set a goal, not overnight. Follow it up as much as you can accomplish. Set a goal and keep on moving towards that. And I'm not saying to set a goal. A goal has already been set by NEPRA. So we follow that gradually on that path. You see, you talked about the FBR issue and the collection of income tax, and my bill also shows income tax. It's easy to dictate the bureaucrats, the professionals who are paid by the government money, and get this done. Had this been a private sector, would they agree to it? Okay.
is doing it.
Because they're spineless, I must say. But would they collect TV bills and so on? So the point is that we should keep on moving on the lines that have been set. We need improvement in governance. We need to do whatever, but let's be very honest about itself. It is unaccomplishable that the government interference, the interference of all those who matter, including the politicians, will continue. As we move on that path, slowly and gradually, power sector, the private sector will get its feet on the ground and will do many things. In fact, there were many things in respect of reduction of losses which KESE did, which public sector could not do. Of course, if they are paying, they are now under pressure on income tax, there must be some weakness on their side. They might be looking for some new license. There had been talk about selling KESE, so they are vested interest. But having said that, set a goalpost and move gradually towards that. Otherwise, it will never.
Very good point. Tausif sir, the issue is to bypass the gorilla. There's a big gorilla in the room that we don't want to talk about, which is the governance system. And fair enough, I accept what Ishfaq Sahab is saying. It's a very good solution. Is NEPRA confident this can be implemented? It can be done well? Is NEPRA capable of managing it? Will it happen?
See, what I tried to do was reduce NEPRA's intervention as much as possible. Being regulator, I tried to deregulate the market as much as possible. And CTBCM, and then, Pakistan's power sector was growing like jungle bushes. There was zero planning. Since last 71 years, zero planning. What I tried to give was IGCEP and then TCEP, Indicative Generation Capacity Extension Plan. At least you should know, and based on DISCO's, projections of demand, and on the least cost basis, and primarily on indigenous fuel-based projects. I had an honor of meeting the previous Prime Minister, and I gave him a briefing. And I told him that at one point in time, Philippines had 44% losses. They all sat together and said, are we going to continue like this? They said, it's untenable, it's not doable. They said, what should we do? They said, no political influence, no personal influence. Today their losses stand at 7.5%. Is that nation famous for anything other than caregiving? Or Pakistan is known for many great things, like we are the ones who developed our own indigenous nuclear thingy, We are the ones who are second to none as far as anti-terrorism war is concerned. Can't we do this? Very easy. That's was one of my points, that I'll give you 2 top defaulters from each distribution company. That was 3.5 years back. Let's tackle them. If any third guy steals electricity from their subdivision, I'll be answerable to you. Unfortunately, so I told at that time, if we are not going to take these measures now, we are bound to be doomed. Because the way things are going, it is going to be untenable. It is not going to be possible for the people of this country. One comment I would like to give, Bashar Sahab, what you mentioned. My request to everybody, all concerned, is that we have to take it as a national crisis. It is simply not possible that Titanic is sinking and we can afford to provide motorboats to somebody to salvage them. We all have to face it together. It is simply not possible that we, let's say, take that 25 rupees out and give our business wheeling charge at 0 and load our well-paying consumers, domestic and others, that additional 28 rupees. So that is going to make their tariff go by another 28 rupees. So the point is, everybody has to face the brunt. Like any Pakistani child getting born anywhere in the world is indebted by 2.5 or 300,000 rupees. So similarly, it is a national cause. We all have to chip in.
Chima Sahab, then we'll go to the floor. Please, folks, start raising your hands.
Sir, we saw that indeed Pakistan is facing an existential threat. And then we had a consensus that basically it is a governance issue, and a very serious one for that. And then we also were of the consensus that, pushing the interested parties out of their intervention in the power or the energy sector is difficult, as you said. All these things are there. But fact of the matter remains that if we are serious about it, if one person decides, maybe the top man decides, that it has to be corrected, it can be corrected, and overnight, sir, at least the governance issue improves. Once that improves, things will fastly correct themselves. Because all of these are man-made. We made them up. We invented them during the last, especially 40 years, not even 30. We contributed a lot to it. We'll have to also remember one thing, that the energy sector has a huge political economy about it. So people understand that if they have a hegemony or some connection with it or a foothold, they can really do wonders, gets votes and votes and votes. But I am, sir, very, very clear about it, that if we want to do it, the governance issue can be improved overnight. Thank you.
Be done without getting rid of political interference. Anyway, we'll go to the floor, get some questions, involve the audience. Okay, go ahead, Ji Taqir Sahab. But ये energy पे discussion है Taqir Sahab, उस पे नहीं, climate change पे नहीं, please.
I'll bring it to climate. Mr. Chair, energy is also a public health issue. I want to ask about the air quality and the linkage with today's discourse. And my second question related with this, one panelist mentioned the indigenous sources of fuel. I think probably you were referring to coal. Why is then that the import of coal has been increasing, even though most of the licenses for coal power plants were given on the assumption that this will be domestic fuel? And my last question in this connection, in this context, is that if we look at the composition of Pakistan's emissions, about 51% come from agriculture, about 31% comes from energy, and energy in the sense of transportation and industry, but 25% or so comes from bad energy management in industry, industrial processes, which means that the cost of doing business goes up. So in many, many ways, I feel that the energy sector is making us increasingly uncompetitive, both in domestic and international contexts. Thank you.
Ji, anybody else? Ji, unko pass kar de.
Yeah, I had quick three questions, Nadeem Sahab. I think three of them mostly directed. Structure of utilization, we've heard nothing on the structure of utilization. Now, this can be also interpreted at the macro level and micro level, right? Exactly, the issue is household. I think somebody mentioned household versus industrial. I think we need to have a deeper talk on that, because there are very few countries in that list that Durkon showed that actually have the kind of utilization. So, you know, let's not make a joke. Second question, the rising cost, and I find the panel saying the cost must go down, cost must go down. Why don't we actually turn the thing around and say, let's face the cost? Is our energy, the industry competitive enough? Because, you know, so that's a question. Can we look at rising costs as incentives to do good in the sector, which we haven't done? And the third question, why do we still supply multiple sources of energy to my doorstep? I don't get it. It should be electrons only. Why is there this downside on this? You fix that. We want to send gas to Gilgit-Baltistan. Are we off our rockers? I mean, this we got to change. Thank you.
My name is Sayyid Mubashir Ali. I am fellow member of Institute of Cost Management Council of Pakistan. Very enlightened discussion of energy crisis, flashpoint always. I think adding fuel to the fire is because of the international energy prices, as Tosif Saab rightly mentioned, manifold it increased. And the other side, the devaluation, that impacted a lot. Basically, two basic problems. I'll ask the panelist to highlight what are the short-term measures when things are under not your control. How can you control what is happening right now? And the second is the digital solution. The power sector, how much the sector is taking advantage of the digital solutions available across the world, and we are lagging behind in that. The second point. Yes, please.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम जिंदगी दर्शक एक कमेंट और दो क्विक पॉइंट्स एक तो ये कि in our system rather than we are increasing the load is actually going down. Last year the load dropped by 13 terawatt hour while our generation capacity increased by 20 terawatt hour. Next year, the generation capacity will increase by another 30 terawatt hour, and this will continue for the next 5-7 years. Now, the challenge that we are facing, that our load is not going to continually grow even if we reduce the prices slightly. The reason is that now the disruption in the power sector is happening, and recently we visited China, and the prices of batteries are just slashing down. So now the solar plus battery kind of thing is so cheap that I can have a very cheap grid-free living, right? That's number one thing. The second thing is I think we need to look at some of the out-of-box disruptive solutions to solve our challenges. Looking at electric vehicle, somebody talked about the gas to electricity conversion. We are not talking about that at all. We're not talking about it adding sustainable loads to the grid that can sustain for the whole year rather than air conditioning load. Thank you.
So can I? Thank you very much, Chair. Very important aspect, sir, while we are talking about quick reforms, किसी भी panelist ने ये बात नहीं की. None of the panelists said that we should let go of the subsidies, the free units that everybody is taking care of. Why we are not letting go of that? That should be the first priority. The second one is, when we are talking about privatization of the DISCO, sir, I think in the first stage we need to let it go to the provinces, which we are working upon as well. That the federal should let go things to the provincial side. And as we were discussing all along, local governments, everything, this needs to happen. The federal cannot keep everything in its own hand forever. So, okay, let not go to the private sector first, because somebody said greed of the private sector. Sir, it's the business community that run the economy. You cannot call us greedy. So we won't accept that. So you can give it to the provinces in stage one, and at least we will know who's responsible if things are not getting done. And so lastly, the only way we can take care of all the things is if we increase our capacities. Right now, our economy is on standstill. We need to revive our CPEC. We need to bring industrialization back. This is the only way we can take care of that. And please, if we have to import the fuel, the government has notified barter. We can bring Afghanistan coal in barter.
Ji, panel, whoever wants to go ahead.
Ji, I can respond to 5 questions. First of all is that, sir, you mentioned that why we are jacking up I think, share of imported coal. That's not true. CPEC projects came a few years back. There were 4 of them at that time. But after that, we are issuing licenses and giving a tariff and setting up only indigenous fuel-based projects. And you, Mohammed Ali, you are going to vouch for this. So we have set up 2,400 megawatts right on Thar mine mouth, actually. So second is, you, sir, mentioned about electrons, why are they different? Because electrons are being produced from different sources. So at the end of the day, it's a common pool. So no matter what.
I think he's talking about gas and gas.
Yeah.
Households getting multiple.
Yeah. That's one of the biggest mistakes we did, actually, that we started giving very cheap gas to, rather than giving a value-added, item, which now that we have the power plants, we should be producing electricity and selling it for heating as well as cooling, for both. And we are giving it to the cheaper gas. The third one is digital solution. Yes, Mubashir, I fully agree with you. Digital solution, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going, and digital solution is the solution for like AMIs, AMRs, and pre-paid meters. So we should, now that we are so late, living in 19th century, we should immediately jump to the most modern technology to our benefit. Fourth one is, Dr. Saab, you mentioned about battery. As long as our cost, energy, produce price, we can beat that. So we can go with any technology. So we can embrace new technology, maybe electric, solar with the battery. All we are doing is desperately waiting for the battery storage prices to go down. Once it slashes like wind and solar, every single electron will start coming from And the last one is basically provincial, I think, who asked this question, the last one? I forgot the question, actually. Sorry. Yeah. I think this is going to be a biggest scam in few years' time, because what federal government is trying to do is park its responsibility to the provincial governments. even if you push them and take it now, tomorrow they will not be in a position to actually afford that, finance that. Then you will have a serious fight between federation and provinces. So it may appear to be a very easy solution right now, but it is going to be catastrophic in the days to come. If federal government can't manage it, how can provincial government manage it? I don't understand that. If you need boots on ground, you can always seek their support on that. But handing over everything to them, that won't work. My opinion.
If I may, sir, we had a question from our friend here, why demand is getting reduced. Fact of the matter remains that the demand is constantly rising, and at the moment, you will not believe it, unmet or suppressed demand is upwards of 15,000 megawatts. Just the suppressed demand of Karachi alone, K Electric alone, is upwards of 2,000 megawatts. Actually, what is happening is the inability to collect bills is forcing the present governors and managers of the sector to resort to what is known as the revenue-based load shedding. As of today, while we are sitting here in this hall, all lit up through crystal, 5,000 megawatts of load shedding is being conducted, and primarily in the hinterlands of Sindh, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and the erstwhile FATA. Today, in Balochistan, we have load shedding of between 4 hours to 20 hours. And another of my friends, Farooqi Saab, also said, and you were clear about it, that it is a private good, right? So if somebody is not able to pay, they should not get the supply. Now what happens is, this is rendering the federation apart. When you go to Sindh, Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in FATA, they say, are we not Pakistanis? And then the comparison is between Lahore and Khuzdar. We have to do all these things. It is a public good. It will remain public good in countries like us for some years to come. Of course, a day would come when we would say, okay, it is a private good. And then something else also. During the PIDE-supported study, we came to some statistical conclusions. The first one was that in districts which had low per capita income, less than the national average, there the operations were in a bad shape. There we were not able to collect monies, and theft and illegal abstraction of energy was also taking place. In districts where the power sector had not invested during the last 35 years, it was the same thing. In districts which had low HDI, also had low level of electricity operations. And the fourth and the final was where the governmental rate, which was also mapped, it has 5 basic conditions, where the governmental rate was low, the electricity operations were also bad, and all these things were coterminous. It is a very complex issue. But for a country like Pakistan, which has fissures between each of its units, it has to be considered as a public good and nothing else. My good friend Durrani is right, it has to be a single fuel. It's not right. You know, you have access to everything under the world, LPG, natural gas, right? Oils, gas, electricity. Now this is a joke. And by the way, I'll also share one conclusion that the best conversion from any fuel is electricity. So Pakistan should move towards full utilization of electricity, and if this is done, then the present capacities can be taken over. Thank you.
Sir, I would take this air quality question and link it with sustainability or long-term sustainability. Yes, we are taking a short-term solution in terms of investing in coal power plants. We should not be investing in those. We should look for a long-term planning or long-term sustainable solution. Another perspective of it is to look at the perspective of like in the future, it would be linked with something like GSP plus status where exports commodities would be linked with production with the cleaner fuels. So why not take these steps now? We should invest this in sustainability issues, and air quality is part of it, but there is a probably economic case for as well where we shift our investments from coal power plants to sustainable and renewable energy solutions. Another question was one fuel. Yes, agreed with Chima Saab as well. There should be one fuel. There is a capacity for in Pakistan. We should have this. We already have, thanks to for Kisa, that there is a IGSAP indicative generation capacity expansion plan, but there should be integrated energy capacity plan for Pakistan in which not only power sector is being considered, but also other sources of energy as well for other electricity or energy services. For example, just to give you an example, in total primary energy mix, 20% comes from natural gas, which is depleting in Pakistan. And when that would be depleted, the main problem would be the cooking choices, cooking fuel. So we need to take care of that as well. So another one is that subsidies and free units. I think with IMF program, subsidies are being slashed now. We need to have this targeted subsidies going on linked with Benazir income support program and so on. Free units, although there is a lot of talk of free units, but free units are only very insignificant part of very
free units. Everything is paid through the budgets.
Okay, let me say it. Yeah.
Not at all, sir. Nothing is free.
Sir, let me say.
From the departments.
Sir, but yeah, people are not paying, and
because it's part of the pay, you can monetize that.
But sir, when someone say that see that their bill is 40,000 plus rupee and their neighbor is not paying anything and consumption is like equal, so there is a need to.
I have a very small comment. In fact, I want to endorse the discussion in this session fully, and particularly with regards to giving distribution of power to provinces. I think that's a non-starter. That will be a fallacy, absolute fallacy. There's no time to do experimentation. We should go on our path, which we have already chosen. A slight comment on the free units and so on and so forth. There's nothing free. The only thing is that it otherwise would be monetized. And if it is a private sector, it won't be free, it will be monetary compensation. So again, we should not move away from our path for privatization, go gradually on, and that's the way to govern it better. Thank you.
Just a quick comment on subsidies, and I do think that subsidies should be allocated if they're crucial in meeting our public policy goals. I think that's what we often miss when we talk about subsidies. So there should absolutely be targeted subsidies if needed at all. They should be competitive, and if they are non-competitive, they should be supporting the market, and the levels should be capped. I think that's something that is often missed. Lastly, there is no transparency in the way we are allocating subsidies, so absolutely we need transparency in that as well. And so subsidy reform is absolutely crucial to strengthening the reform in the energy sector. Thank you.
Somebody mentioned about coal and the impact coal has got on the climate, and this is a World Bank sponsored event. I should not be saying it, but countries have looked at their national interest. Very recently, during Ukraine-Russia war, Germany actually expanded one of their coal mine, and we missed the bus when we should have exploited those reserves maybe in 90s and in early 2000. We missed the bus then, and now it has become increasingly difficult. Now I don't think that there's going to be any further expansion of Thar coal. There's not going to be any more plants there, because the only lending agency, because you understand that these are projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. So the Chinese banks also are not supporting coal now. So the coal is going, now what is the way forward now for us? And I think that's something on which a lot of work needs to be done, and that is to maximize your renewable potential. On the renewable potential, I give you just one small example, and Tawseef Saab probably is fully aware of the issue, that even the existing renewable assets that we have in the country, we are unable to utilize them. We have a current account deficit issue. We are importing energy of worth $13 billion, but at least the energy where dollars are not being spent, we are unable to evacuate that energy from the Jhampir corridor because of technical reasons. The second low-hanging fruit there is that it is a wind corridor and it has thousands of acres of land. And you can easily convert it into a hybrid site where you put up solar in tandem with wind during the day, and the two complement each other. So now if you put up a solar plant, the efficiency is 20%. You put up a wind plant, the efficiency is about 40%. But when you combine them, the efficiency goes up to 50-something%, and the infrastructure stays the same. Because during the daytime you have sun and less wind, and during the night time you have no sun but more wind. And so that is a low-hanging fruit which must be availed, but I don't know.
Nadeem Saab, sorry to interrupt. Nadeem Saab, we have a question from a lady here, and I think this will be the last question for the session, but she's been waiting very patiently for about the last 20 minutes.
Sorry, Selina Irfan. I agree with the panel discussion. It's been very fruitful. I'm just going to raise 2 points in one question. Firstly, something I've been pointing out, energy, when we talk about energy, we get concentrated on power. It's not just power. Integrated energy means all the fuel sources. So the discussion on energy has been just power today again. Secondly, we've missed out a very big point, the SDG 7 goals. The SDG 7 goal. When we are talking about governance, when we are talking about management, and we're talking about long-term planning, we now have to look at the SDG goals of affordability, the reliability, the scalability, and the accessibility now. And it has to all come down to energy security for a country like us, given the vulnerabilities of our economic parameters. The question is, and we've brought up renewable so many times, it's called variable renewable energy. It's not across the country. It can't be put across the country. If you look at, and we are doing this exercise for integrated energy planning at the Ministry of Planning Energy Wing. We've just done a forecast, and we just had a conference on the 20th, where we presented our results, and we're working on the second iteration. But what we have seen is that even with renewable, natural gas for electricity makes the most sense. Unfortunately, we've passed the initial stage in the ENP for natural gas. We're running out of the initial reserves. We now need to get into the complex structure of ENP, which requires money, investment, and FDI. You have the parity across gas pricing, which we are going to be facing with the 50% increase in gas pricing. You have gas parities, which is not bringing in investment. You have losses in gas, you have losses in power. The management, the planning, and like you rightly said, sir, the governance, they now need to come together. We need to do long-term planning. We need to build in structures based on empirical evidence, impact-based planning that is effective now. The comments from the panel on this.
They're all saying we should finish.
We will.
So let's finish.
We have to go home, sir.
You want to speak too? Everybody wants to speak here. Okay, 2 more questions, then we finish. Okay? Challenge quickly.
August 25 को 25.6 गीगावाट हमने प्रोड्यूस किया और
Can you
हमारा
please
बेस
speak in English?
सर okay sir हमारी in our wind energy we have two part tariff, CPP and EPP. The EPP, the energy purchase price is 6.52 rupees, NAPRA determination of this year. And the wind tariff is 19 cents, which is like 60 rupees, and 15 cents, which is like 45 rupees. And wind is intermittent. A wind turbine runs on the shoulder of fossils. So NAPRA should have forecasted that the price of renewable energy should be less than the EPP. Now we have 20 years contract of Qaid-e-Azam solar, which is 20 cents, and all the wind energies, which are more than 15 cents. And
थोड़ा जल्दी कर लें जी,
European,
please.
and your,
We don't need all those figures. यहाँ बड़े specialists बैठे हैं.
Okay.
सवाल पूछ लें. These guys know all these things.
Okay. My next question is, you have 17.5 gigawatt of cooling load. If I multiply it by 4 million per megawatt and have a reserve margin of 4 gigawatt, that is $82 billion of investment for the cooling load. And we have massive economic distortions, like speaker before me pointed out. We are selling gas at dirt cheap price to the household sector, which is consuming 51% of our gas.
We are talking about that. No? बात हो रही है.
And we are consuming 48% of our electricity in the household sector.
बिल्कुल ठीक.
Both are at the cost of our industry.
So are you telling me that we should stop using electricity, give it all to the power sector, to the industrial sector? I don't think so. I think we need electricity too. जी, उधर दे शायद 17वां एक सेकंड. Quick.
It's an observation rather than anything else. I don't hear affordability being discussed the way it should be. If you compare tariffs across countries, please also compare income levels. So this is something to think about. Secondly, the crux of the problem lies in the gas pricing, the gas tariff that for natural gas that we have been talking about. I think the understanding in the room that why gas prices are low is missing, and that is that right until the beginning of the 90s, gas to consumers was priced at a percentage of fuel oil parity. That was changed by the World Bank, and which has basically precipitated the entire energy crisis in Pakistan. Please think about it.
Thank you so much. Yes, I just have a quick question. There's been a lot of talk about privatization, and I'm just wondering, how do we avoid some of the issues that we see with KE today, and how do we avoid privatization monopolies in particular? Thank you.
There was a very interesting question on the board there that 80% of the people said yes to. If the cost of supply could be reduced by imports from India, would you agree to it? And they said yes. And some studies say that if you import no more than 4% of power, you could save nearly $180 million per year in system reduction costs by 2035. We'd like to hear your views on that.
If I'm allowed. Strangely, way back in 2000, I was part of the team which went over to India to export power from Pakistan to India. This was also there, and unfortunately, we came back empty-handed because of the animosity or the politics between both the countries. There are issues, and there are issues. There are circles within circles. And then we also have to agree that Indians have as yet to achieve energy or electricity autarky. They are facing the same problems. It was only last year that on a particular day, and as far as I remember, it was the 27th of June 2022, when India was facing, the northern grid was facing a shortage of 27,000 megawatts. Those issues are there. Things are not easy. Now, coming over to privatization, it is a considered opinion that privatization per se is a very difficult task. In Pakistan, it becomes immediately controversial. And of course, there are interested parties who would like to, buy all the discourse. It is there. So most of the people now are talking of management contracts. The ownership remains with the government, and you give out concessions. And for that, the right way, which is being debated, is that you need a best set of professionals who will take care of the management, backed up by a financial house, because without that, nothing can happen. So these are important things. Now, coming over to what a friend said about renewables, Renewables have a big issue. They always take a piggyback ride on baseload plants. So it is not a 100% solution or a whole solution. It has to be looked into, and then the national grid has to be buffeted before you can do anything about it. It is being done, but it needs more efforts. Then we were also asked a question about investments. The former chairman NEPRA is sitting here. NEPRA does not shy away from from approving any legitimate expense. It was only 2 years ago that they invited 5-year investment plans from all the discos, and the discos could ask for the sky if it was legitimate. So it is no issue. Monies are not the issue. Investment money is not the issue. The issue is that the governance has to improve. The management has to improve. Otherwise, nothing will be done.
Sir, if I can take this SDG 7 question. Well, SDG 7 has 3 major indicators: clean cooking, share of renewable energy, and energy intensity. So if we do this sort of integrated energy planning, not the power planning, rightly mentioned by a colleague from planning division, that this would not only solve this problem of capacity payments or capacity issues because we have excess capacity, it will solve the problem of households consuming firewood and getting into respiratory illness. It will increase the renewable energy share, and energy intensity will be decreased because of efficient fuels. In terms of trading with India, I would like to mention CASA 1000 here, backed by World Bank. We all know that what happened to that project. Border TAPI and CASA 1000 as well. And another problem was the investment or financing. There are lots of innovative financing solution in the world market as well, just like just energy transition partnerships. There are energy transition mechanisms, energy compacts as well. So we need to have this energy diplomacy as well. Thank you.
Somebody mentioned about the wind tariffs. So first of all, tariffs, when NEPRA looks at those tariffs, and Tausif Sahib can further comment on it, they look at levelized tariffs, and I think, and the tariffs are reflective of the cost of technology at a given point of time when those decisions are taken. Like for example, Qaid-e-Azam Solar, when that was set up, a tariff of about 20 cents was given. And because such was the cost of technology at that point in time. Over time, innovations happened, new technologies came in, the cost started coming down, and it has come down to about 4.5 cents. Now, you say that the country or NEPRA should have had that vision back then, that they should have forecasted the price of 10 years or after 10 years, and then they should have held those projects back and not implemented them. I think it's not a fair comment. It is a process. It is a process of evolution, and it happens in an exactly similar manner across the world.
I would like to leave on a note of optimism. First of all, I would like to thank my audience. They are very patient and very jubilant, and I'm full of energy actually, asking questions so late in the evening. So I'm very happy about that. I assure you about one thing, that all our problems are written on the wall. All our solutions also written on the wall. All we need to do, as I said earlier, some doers who can take action and fix things as we move on. Shahid Sattar Sahab, you mentioned about affordability. I think affordability is today's theme actually. Had we not been facing affordability issue, we would not be sitting here today this late and try to do the brainstorming how to fix that. So I believe, again repeat, we have more capacity than we need. If today we do a magic and kickstart our economy, power sector stands with you to take that growth in no time. Second is that our problems are definitely immense, but there's no problem in this world which cannot be resolved. With best brains are sitting here, we can easily resolve them. All we need to do is understand the severity of our problem and how immediately we have to fix it. I think now, by getting into this situation, the realization has come that we need to fix it, and inshallah we'll fix it.
So first of all, I would second Tausif Sab here that, mashallah, we have a very energetic audience, so thank you for their patience. And honestly, this was, we had very short time, so we couldn't cover the breadth of all that we could have talked about. For example, energy security and the questions related to SDG 7 and their joining themes. We were limited to a very specific set of questions, and we tried to maintain in that. So first point addressed there. Second, there was a question on the nature of monopolies and whether privatization leads to monopolies. So I believe there was a consensus in this group here that we need competitive markets and we need to discourage monopolies, and the governance is going to tackle that. Lastly, I would like to end with the fact that power is political, right? Like, we cannot think of power, electricity, as an apolitical question. It is tied to the heart of our political economy. And therefore, what Chima Saab had said as well, I actually agree with that, that power is a public good, right? And it's actually tied to that whole political economy question. So we cannot solve it very neatly. And I think we should be cognizant of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. 30 years ago, I used to write about governance being Pakistan's main problem. Now I think it's beyond governance. I think it's a cultural problem. I think everybody is very optimistic. Tausif Saab is very optimistic that it can solve the problem. Quite frankly, I don't think we can solve any problem. In 75 years, we have solved no problem, and I have no hesitation in saying this problem will not only not be solved in my lifetime, but in my children's lifetime. With that optimistic note, thank you very much. I think Naji wants to do the farewell. Thank you.